Washington Commanders in a New Year's Eve matchup. Let's get it on. What's up, everybody? Thank you for joining us on this lovely Thursday evening right before our Thursday night football game. I'm joined by Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. How you doing today, Jeff?
We're good. Obviously, getting to the grind here, the end here of another NFL season. Some teams, obviously, the story has been written as far as what is left of their 2022 season. Obviously, for others, still up in play before we get to what is always I don't think there's anything like the NFL playoff run in any other sports.
So much fun, right?
Absolutely. And you always get a little, you always get a darling out of nowhere. Cincinnati Bengals going to the Super Bowl last year. Always good time of year.
Funny question, actually. I didn't mean to, even think about this question ahead of time, but what's the Browns-Bengals dynamic? Do you guys tend to root for the Bengals at all, or is like a hatred between you guys? It's still Ohio together.
Nobody in the AFC North likes anybody else. Nobody in the it would definitely be an every man for themselves. No, it does not work like that.
I got you. That's what I figured. All right, good stuff. All right, Jeff. So obviously we have a huge matchup coming up this Sunday. Huge for Washington. They need to win 2 in a row to get to the playoffs. Actually, Cleveland's kind of like a frisky team. We don't really know what to expect with them coming up. They had the biggest trade in the offseason, in my opinion. Deshaun Watson coming over to Cleveland definitely has changed the dynamic for that team. How has his return affected the team, both on and off the field?
It was weird. See, it was always just weird because you knew there was some sort of suspension coming. So you were getting this dynamic of, basically 2 seasons blended into one. There was going to be the pre-Deshaun and would the pre-Deshaun be good enough that even the post-Deshaun even was what 2022 was going to bring. Obviously Browns underachieved 4-7. They played better probably than a 4-7 football team. Their defense certainly. But the main aspect of this here in bringing Deshaun in, you have Myles Garrett who just turned 27 years old. You have Nick Chubb who just turned 27 years old. Deshaun Watson is 27 years old. David Njoku, 27 years old. This team was trying to put together a nucleus for a 3 to 5 season run, understanding that most likely 2022 was going to probably be a wash.
Okay.
And Deshaun's first game with Houston, obviously a difficult one. The second game in Cincinnati was a little bit, was certainly going to be harder than Houston. Not many people were at the game. Cincinnati's a lot more of a rival. Either they were going to get on Deshaun, they were going to speak their mind. He got his 2 home games against obviously the Baltimore Ravens, and then the disappointing loss on Christmas Eve. A lot of people, everything just overly critical. Why are they throwing the ball this much? This, that, and the other thing. You paid $238 million for a quarterback and gave up 3 first-round picks. Your offense is no longer a running team. Your offense is now based on Deshaun Watson. And we saw other quarterbacks play in terrible weather over the weekend with a lot of success. Joe Burrow completed 40 passes. Josh Allen in Chicago, nothing stopped him from doing his thing on Saturday. So for the Browns, it's all about Deshaun Watson. You want to get as much out of him you can in these last 2 games here, get all the rust off of them so you can just work on setting up, what's here. So when you start OTAs and you go into training camp, there is no, there's nothing holding it. Everything will be there and everything will be put upon the shoulders of Deshaun and all these young stars that they have on this roster to hopefully go out and, put together what ultimately is the goal for any NFL team competing for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, that makes sense. Obviously adding the young talent at quarterback, he's definitely a very dynamic quarterback as well, a true dual threat. It's actually a pretty interesting dynamic, right? So introducing Deshaun Watson, bringing him to the team. I'd say the identity for Cleveland has been, run first team for very many years now. They invested in Joel Pitino and Wyatt Teller, Bill Callahan, who we're familiar with as your offensive line coach over there as well. How has he acclimated to the team? Has it been pretty seamless so far? Is there still kind of a rough transition, or are they kind of reverting more to passing now, or what are you seeing with Deshaun now?
I think it's gone very well as far as that. And I think the thing was they just had a great individual in place in Jacoby Brissett. As much as guys in the locker room, players appreciated playing with Jacoby Brissett, everybody kind of knew the deal. And for Jacoby Brissett, this wasn't his first rodeo. When he finally got the job with the Colts, he wasn't supposed to have the job. Andrew Luck, out of nowhere, quietly retires, steps away, and all of a sudden, Jacoby Brissett's handed a job. And if the Colts had the proper amount of time, Jacoby Brissett would have been their quarterback. But that's the way it worked out. But him coming in, the players spike all the time. They understand the player that he is, the talent that he has. It's been a little slow coming out of the gate, which I think everybody should have expected. Over 700 days off. And the other thing is, he didn't come back to his own team. It's one thing if you miss that amount of time and you're going right back into what you were always doing. It's new receivers, it's new offensive line, it's new play calls, it's new running backs, it's new coaching. There was so much newness for Deshaun. But as far as being there and now being entrenched, the guys have him. The guys know that this is the best quarterback they've ever played. And a guy like Joel Bitonio, he knows this is the best talent. And as a guy who's a 9-year veteran, he's getting closer to what could be his last shot. And if you're going to have to gamble, Deshaun Watson's a pretty solid talent.
That makes sense. So I guess in retrospect, people are very happy with that trade altogether. They're happy to have Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. Fair to say?
Oh, yeah. It's, he's the fans, understandably so. It's like a tough pill to swallow. You understand you're getting this great player, this amazing talent. But the whole reason you're getting him is obviously have bad luggage with it. But he's now there. The young guys love him. I mean, the younger players, Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa, guys are out with him all the time. You're starting to see, him get in there, and I think it was the big run against Baltimore that sealed the game, where he broke the pack and got like 18 yards, slid, got the first down. And that was it. I think for everybody, it was like, okay, we got our boy's home.
Very good. Let me give a shout out to Dave. He's in the chat. Dave said he was the only one in Commander Nation thinking we were going to win last week against the 49ers, against a rookie QB. We definitely hung tight in the first half. It definitely, got ahead of us in the second half. Jeff, going back to this, right? So, obviously the Cleveland Browns, an up-and-coming team for many years. They seem to get a lot of talent going into Cleveland and always on the brink of breaking through and probably busting through the AFC North. How is Kevin Stefanski perceived in Cleveland? He's obviously the offensive coordinator in Minnesota, is coming over to Cleveland. Has his offense translated well? Is he perceived pretty well in the locker room? How's it going?
Yeah, no, for Coach Stefanski, and I think a lot of people, and this just happens with the Cleveland Browns. You're just used to saying, all right, well, if the Browns aren't playing well, what do you mean they're going to keep their coach? Everybody just assumes the Cleveland Browns are going to fire everybody every single year. For Stefanski, and, Deshaun Watson was vocal on this today. He shows a lot of faith Coach Stefanski wants to do as far as, what he's asking for him at the quarterback position. It probably didn't help Coach Stefanski that, in such a difficult season like 2020, his team hit the ground running like they did. No OTAs, no preseason, first time, NFL head coach. And you go out and you ultimately win a playoff game and, you make it from, a couple of seconds away from going to the AFC Championship game. I mean, the Baker injury obviously thwarted the entire season. Weeks where, the injury was really bothering him, and weeks where he did play well. Then became the static and the friction between Baker and the coaching staff. And then you get an owner involved, and the owner starts to hear about, wow, there's really, really big names available at the quarterback position. And, you saw the quarterback you had, there were big names available. They wanted in on any of them. And, Deshaun Watson, after several meetings, after several sitting down with Coach Stefanski, after the blessing, of course, because, never giving $238 million guaranteed away without the blessing, certainly not having. So all those things come to pass. And now Coach Steph, look, there's going to be some changes here. There's going to be changes. And we're going to, last week, you already started to see it with, the Browns throwing the ball 31 times with negative 20-something degrees or wherever cold it was out there. But this is a team that's transitioning. Nick Chubb, it's going to be different for him. It's going to be a lot more running out of the gun. That's not really, what Nick Chubb has been comfortable with. But, for what they think Deshaun can do with his arm, transitions are going to be made for the players. And you're going to do everything you can to get your quarterback in the best place to succeed, because you believe, as always, if the quarterback leads, everybody else follows.
100%. So you definitely have a long-term perspective with Cleveland. That definitely makes a lot of sense. I have two more questions, big picture, before we start diving into the game real quick. So I guess, look at the schedule. Cleveland, definitely a very talented team. There was a stretch at one point in the year where they lost 6 of 7. Now they're trying to kind of bounce back and playing more 500 ball. What do you attest to that, the little I guess that dip in the middle of the season? Was that more injury based or was it more lack of talent? I don't really know. I'm trying to ask you candidly, honestly.
The defense this year, and it's been mostly everybody to their man agrees that Jacoby Brissett probably played 10 times better than anybody had. We all just assumed that the defense, which didn't have much changes, was going to continue their path. In the second half of 2021, they were a lights out defense. They were a fantastic group. We all kind of had the feeling that this was going to transition here in 2022 and week 2 against the Jets. There were other weeks, Bailey Zappi taking you behind the woodshed for 300 yards. The defense just never really found much rhythm, much sync. There were injuries, but I don't think it really changed much. They don't have much of the defensive tackle position. Linebackers now, their top 4 linebackers on their roster are out for the season on IR, have been on IR for a significant amount of time. Yeah, but you can't really complain because you're putting out players like Reggie Wrangler.
I saw that.
And Deion Jones. These are longtime NFL. They've played better over the last couple of weeks, starting to get a little bit more consistent. Obviously, doesn't mean a hill of beans now with the Browns season over. But defensively has been the biggest issue. The Browns were in a lot of games, and once it was basically fighting with all they had with Jacoby Brissett. Once they got behind, then it became a lot more difficult. The one thing we all talked about Jacoby Brissett this year was don't put him in a position where you're asking Jacoby Brissett to win the game. You have a running game. You have a strong offensive line. We thought we had what was a strong defense. All recipes to not basically put the ball in Jacoby Brissett's hand to have to go win games. So there were times he was asked to, but for the most part, the biggest story for the Browns this year is that the defense underachieved great 7 record by the time Deshaun Watson finally walked in the door. A lot of us, we were thinking maybe 5-6, even 6-5. And defense sadly just, it couldn't make stops, couldn't make tackles. Real poor season on that side of the ball, which is going to lead to a lot of changes on that side.
Yeah, it's really interesting. From an outside third party perspective, you think the Cleveland Browns, stacked defense. They have Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit, a lot of great talent over there. It's kind of surprising that they had a kind of a regressed season this year. Last big picture question. So I'm looking at some upcoming free agents for you guys: Jadeveon Clowney, Kareem Hunt, Jacoby Brissett, all free agents going into the offseason. Do you think they'll return to the team next year, or what do you think their future holds?
Jadeveon Clowney is a really tricky one. The Browns had him last year, paid him $8.5 million. He got 9.5 sacks. Jadeveon Clowney this year is making $14 million. He has 2 sacks. And he was battling concussion, missed last week, was out of practice today with an illness. The problem with Jadeveon Clowney is everybody knows when he's on the field what you get. The problem is it's the crystal ball that nobody has, is how often is he on the field? So it's a really tough spot with Jadeveon Clowney. It's over. It's not that it was a great situation for the time he was here, but again, the Browns are now going to be a team that throws the ball more. You're not going to have to worry so much, about having a second back. Kareem has lost a little juice in the legs. It's not there like past, so all tough, situations for this team to deal with. Jacoby Brissett, looking at, the way the NFL is working right now, looking at teams with situations, the New York Jets, things like this, at the quarterback position, I think there's a home for Jacoby Brissett. Would I love for him to stay? Would I love for him to stay as a backup? Yeah, but at this point in Jacoby Brissett, money's great. I want to play. You know what I'm saying? I want to put a little legacy out there for myself. So I think there's certainly homes for Jacoby Brissett to go out. And, if anything, maybe, be a beginning of the year starter, maybe while you're grooming a rookie, or if he plays well enough. There are situations. I mean, the New York Jets would love to trot out Jacoby Brissett this Sunday, as opposed to any of the other 4 quarterbacks they have on the roster. They probably
100%, 100. I agree with that. 100% agree with that. So let's kind of dive into this week's matchup. We have a pretty big matchup over here in DC. Washington at 7-7-1. The Browns sitting there at 6-9. Washington won 5 of 6 going into December. Have not won in December at all. We've had 1 tie and 2. I don't know why it says a loss right there, but we basically had 1 tie and 2 losses over last month. You guys are playing about 500 balls, so it's looking pretty solid right there. Other big picture information here. Let's look at the big old data over here. The Cleveland Browns, offensive yards per game, 10th in the league, which is pretty impressive. I didn't really see that coming. Defense, about 16th in the league. Points per game, 21.5, which is pretty solid, pretty respectable right there. Offense, which I expected. Cleveland Browns is, offensive line is one of the best in the league. Nick Chubb is, in my opinion, one of the best running backs in the league. And then we see that rush defense and the pass defense over here. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. I think Washington can't overlook this game. It's going to be very competitive. I guess my question is this. So the rush defense is about 25th overall. The pass defense is 8th overall. Is that because of the defense is really truly shining on the pass defensive front, or is it more like, I guess, more offenses running against Cleveland because they view it as a better strategy? What do you think?
Oh, it's definitely, why do one if you don't have to, you know what I'm saying? The teams have run the ball. The Chargers game, even when the Browns found a way to stay in late in the game, Austin Eckler was on a tear. I mean, they could, I think it was 240, could easily run for 300 yards that day. So it just can't get it right. And the defensive tackle play, the problem is defensive tackles, it's not only that they're, basically losing, not getting off their blockers, they're getting shoved back so far. They're disrupting the structure of the defense. They're disrupting the path for the linebackers. They're disrupting the angles for the safeties. That's how bad this has been at times. Who say, you know what? Oh, we're 1st and 10. Let me just see if I can do something, anything to make a play. So basically, you break protocol. You don't do exactly what you're called for, and you just build, and then basically you leave your teammates out hanging. The Atlanta game was another one. The run defense that day was absolutely with the Browns. Didn't have Myles Garrett or Jadeveon Clowney. So you can imagine what a defensive line looked like that day. It's just been a real big struggle on that side of the ball. And, Joe Woods here for 3 years now with the Browns, the defensive coordinator. 2020, and didn't have a lot of names, didn't have a lot of talent, but the defense 2021 closed out extremely strong. 22, everyone thought the story was going to be a lights out defense season, and that's not been the case. And it's going to lead to changes. There's going to be changes. January 9th, Black coming. There's going to be a lot of guys exiting out of the doors of Berea. Coach Stefanski's, basically, I think he's probably going to start 2023 on a warmer seat. He's going to have to go out and make some serious hires for that side of the ball.
Interesting. I didn't realize he had such a hot seat. So real quick, let me look at some 2 questions in the chat real quick. For one, I want to say hi to my guy, Scott Hartley. He's all the way from the UK, dialing in, watching our live stream. Thank you, Scott, for dialing in. I know Jeff appreciates that as well. And then Dave has a question for you, Jeff. He says, I now am worried about Watson as he's a great talent. Does he have the weapons to win consistently? Do you think Cleveland has a well-rounded arsenal to kind of, support and, for Watson to distribute the ball?
Well, my first response to that would be, who were his weapons in Houston?
Yeah.
Not really much, you know what I'm saying? Amari Cooper, 1,000-yard season this year. Donovan Peoples-Jones, with 2 games to go, is 216 yards away from 1,000 yards in his 3rd season. David Njoku has been everything that the Browns could have asked for. The Browns gave him a contract extension. The overall value of the contract was extremely high. A lot of people around the league, a lot of people around Cleveland, even, what are you doing? They've really, really thought it was a number that they just weren't comfortable with. But David Njoku, he's a very, very doesn't get spoken enough about him, and just a really, really athletic guy who continues to find, his groove here as a tight end. With Deshaun Watson and ability with his legs, his ability to roll out, you're starting to see now where the threat is there, because you can you're faking a handoff left to Nick Chubb, spinning your quarterback around. And now that you've put all the emphasis on Nick Chubb, there's David Njoku trickling out. Once he's got the ball in his hands, he's got all the athletic ability in the world. Obviously, we've seen him jumping over people. We see him run away people. We see him run through people. The talent is there. Are they, are they done? No, obviously no. I mean, you probably want to find some sort of ideal slot receiver. They're playing rookie David Bell right now in that situation. It's not going so great just yet. But again, you've got to understand that for some of these guys, they have to understand, they're working in here. For a rookie who maybe played a little bit with Jacoby Brissett, now the game is basically stepped up a ton, and you're playing with a guy like Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
Just need some, more, continuance here with guys getting work with Deshaun Watson. They've all talked about it. They've all said the correct things, that there's going to be a lot of emphasis put in their own off seasons of finding times to get together with each other, and working and getting more familiar, more acclimated with each other. These are all things that are, going to need to be done here as, we start to get closer and closer to what should be 22-3, through hopefully a 3-4 run rounds, where, just a ton of talent. Just got to make sure you find a way that it all comes together. Talent's one thing, coaching's one thing. If it doesn't mesh together, none of it means anything.
Yeah, 100%. It seems like Cleveland has a nice little tight nucleus, all about the same age, about 27 years old, on the rise. So I do like that right there. How good has Amari Cooper been? It's been a pretty good acquisition for you guys, and you got him for pretty cheap. What was it? What was the trade acquisition for Cooper? I forget the whole
Basically, what it was with Amari is Dallas was on the hook for about $18 million.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to pay it. They felt he wasn't worth the $18 million. So, what's your first rationale before you release somebody? You see if somebody's interested. Browns gave up a 5th round pick.
Mm-hmm.
You do it all day long and do it twice on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And the greatest thing about Amari Cooper is for the struggles the Browns went through here with basically loud wide receivers, very social media present wide receivers, guys who let you know when they were disgruntled. Amari Cooper is nothing like that. Amari Cooper comes in, gets asked his 3 or 4 questions, stock answers. Amari Cooper is very similar to Nick Chubb in a personality-wise. Just comes in, does his business, does what is required of him by the media. You're not getting anything flashy. I missed that one. Yeah, got to be better next time. It's about the extent of what you get from a guy like Amari Cooper. And I think it was really, for the Browns, that was key because we went through so much turmoil with 2 vocal wide receivers. And then when you weren't successful, obviously things got hairy. That would have been the case again this year, unless you have guys say, hey, look, my job and my job only is to go out there and do my job. I don't have to care about this. If I got 11 targets this week, if I only get 3 next week, it is what it is. And I think the Browns really, really needed that breath of fresh air within that locker room.
100%. Yeah, Jeff, I can definitely attest for that as well. Being in Washington with kind of a, renowned for being a toxic climate, not necessarily mature players. We're starting to get that here in DC, and I think our team is starting to turn around because of that. So I'm not surprised by that at all. I want to give a shout out to Yam. He actually is one of our listeners from Japan. So actually, thank you for dialing in. He says, morning, gentlemen. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right, so let's dive into a little bit deeper. So I was going to pull this up really quickly. This is the tail of the tape in regard to the quarterback matchups right here. Jeff, be honest with me, man. We're having a good conversation. I love just talking to shop. When Carson Wentz steps on the field for you guys, what are your first thoughts when you think of that in Cleveland? Are you guys even intimidated at all? Are you guys like, here we go again? Like, what are you guys thinking about with Carson Wentz?
I just thought maybe the timing of it is weird. I mean, I think you put Carson in basically a tough spot here because if he doesn't win, everybody, because the problem is you got the 50-50 factor here. If he doesn't win, everybody just say, well, why did you pull Taylor? And huge loved figure. I know, I've got obviously talked about the week. They mentioned yesterday it was a difficult day when the announcement came down because Tyler Heineke, with his work ethic, with his attitude, is just really won over his teammates. But in the same respect, if you're talking about, trying to win 2 games in a 2-game stretch here to get yourself to the playoffs, Carson Wentz a few years ago was, about to be the NFL MVP. So, I mean, it's a tough spot for Washington to be in to have to even make this decision. For the Browns, last time we saw Carson Wentz was in 2020. He came in with the Eagles, and it's crazy to think that, here it is in 2020. He was an Eagle, 21 a Colt. Now, obviously a commander here in 2020. He's got an arm. He throws better. I mean, it's going to really be a great matchup between the 3 wide receivers from Washington, the Browns shelf cornerbacks, all solid players. We'll see. The other thing is, Carson has also been known to hold on to the ball too. Makes you wonder, how much of a factor Myles Garrett could be. But I think maybe it makes it just a tad bit easier. It's not a knock on anything. It's just that Heineke's more of a wild. I know more of what Carson Wentz is. Tyler Heineke is basically just a really guy who's a football player who plays the quarterback position, whereas Carson Wentz, you're a little bit more familiar. But then again, the Browns physically, they have to go off what they saw of him to the mind. That was 2 teams ago, 2 offensive systems ago.
Yeah, realistically, I think the way to beat Carson Wentz is to pressure him, and we'll see if Myles Garrett can do that and Jadeveon Clowney can do that as well. I think Washington's willing to roll the dice. They traded away 2 third-round picks to get Carson Wentz and kind of put him, they invested heavily in him. Ron Rivera, Scott Turner kind of felt that Taylor Heineke basically limited their offense and distributing the ball across all parts of the field. And with our offensive talent, our wide receivers, we do have, Jahan Dotson, if it wasn't for Garrett Wilson and some of these other guys, he might be in contention for Rookie of the Year as our slot wide receiver. So we have the talent. However, like this Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke has limited our points per game, especially over the last month. So I think there's higher upside with Carson Wentz, but then again, there's also a lower floor. So I am kind of worried about that. Before we transition to defense, I guess any last touching on the Cleveland offense one more time. They look pretty solid across the board. I'd say their offensive line is a strength. David Njoku is 6th rated tight end according to PFF. Amari Cooper's having a great year. Is there anybody that's kind of under the radar that Commanders fans will keep an eye on this week? That you appreciate, Jeff?
I think there was a guy who came, as a 6th round pick out of Michigan. Michigan, the offense there never really did him any, justice. Rookie year played some, obviously, with Jarvis, with Odell Beckham Jr. going down middle of the season with the knee. The talk of 2021 camp was about how improved Donovan Peoples-Jones was. We saw Odell Beckham Jr. We saw Jarvis Landry. Donovan was kind of. And this year, the same talk was Donovan Peoples-Jones. And this year, he's together, to this point. So 784 yards receiving, a couple touchdowns for a touchdown against Houston. Here's a guy that's really finding his stride. He appears to maybe have this point with Deshaun Watson. I think, Deshaun's maybe the vertical throws maybe now, the crossers over the middle where you're going between linebackers, safeties, you got to find that hole between a defensive lineman who's got his hands up. That's been a little bit more difficult for Deshaun and Amari to get on the same page there. I don't anticipate any problems, but Donovan Peoples-Jones for the Browns, he would be the guy you would talk about this year. This guy really, really took a major, major stride. And, for a former 6th round pick, and we weren't really ever sure how much he was good. Now, we're to the point now where conversations are being had about Donovan Peoples-Jones as far as, being a long-term player here with the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I've actually heard about him more on the national level too, so that's good to hear. That's awesome. So let's kind of pivot real quick. Let's go over to the defense. I think it's interesting. Like going into the game, I would say that Cleveland's defense would be the more intimidating of the pairing, but it sounds like you were saying the defense is more of like the concern of the two, which is interesting. So let's look at this real quick. So looking over here, obviously Myles Garrett's a standout. He's number 1 rated edge according to PFF. Clowney is pretty solid as well. Reggie Ragland at a 91.6 rating, but he hasn't been playing much. What were you saying about that? He was injured, or was he out?
Reggie Ragland was spent most of the season on the Las Vegas Raiders practice squad. Gotcha. Browns were just down so much. Last week was his 2nd game in action, and this is kind of the story with Reggie Ragland, and this is where it's tough to be a linebacker in the NFL today. If you can play the run, that's great. You're not going to be on the field very much. But in a game where the temperatures were as cold as they were, the wind was a factor, a lot of running of the football, Reggie Ragland, it was a game suited perfectly for him. He'll play a ton this week, but, you probably see more of Deion Jones, especially with Carson Wentz, probably, basically maybe Washington tipping their hand. I think I want to throw the football here a little bit more. So, Deion Jones there. But, safety-wise, John Johnson III, the last couple of weeks have been good. Grant Delpit has been, I think has been pretty solid all season. The cornerbacks, whether it's Emerson, whether it's Ward, whether it's Greg Newsome, these guys have been all solid all year. Just every now and then a gaffe happens or a big play or a busted coverage or whatever. It's kind of turned things the wrong way. But for the most part, a lot of players on that defense. But the problem is basically those defensive tackles and getting the linebacker room right has been the biggest issue for this team this year.
Gotcha. I guess quick question, because Denzel Ward, from an outside perspective, has been renowned. He's that the top 10 pick, and he's kind of a franchise player. He's getting a pretty rough grade here in PFF. Is that fair to say? Is he having a bad season, or are they kind of grading wrong? What are you seeing?
I would say his first 5 or 6 weeks were not good. So in the way, if anybody knows the way PFF works, obviously there is no curve. So you go out there and you throw at a 31 one week. That's going to haunt your overall grade for probably pretty much most of the season. Always a little missed time with Denzel Ward, just a little bit of a smaller statured player, always ends up, missing time. But I think that's why the Browns invested in the room like they did. Their first pick of the 2021 draft was a cornerback. Their first pick of the 2022 draft was a cornerback. Mm-hmm. And I think that they felt for them, the way they were trying to, basically, architecture their franchise is planning on, we are going to be a team that's going to be ahead. So what are we going to need? We're going to need passer guys.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Interesting. So I guess you're saying the weak part of the Cleveland's defense would probably be the interior defensive tackles, right?
Right up the gut. Right up the gut.
Right up the gut. All right, then last one before we move on to predictions and kind of overall big picture. So are there any key players to keep an eye out on defense for Cleveland? Besides Ragland, I guess.
The question would be, what's going to happen at defensive end? Clowney, didn't play last week with a concussion. I don't know if they didn't play him because the concussion was still there, mm-hmm. and say, well, go pound your head on the ice 20 times today because the field's frozen. So I don't know if it was that he wasn't cleared yet, or it was just, hey, this is stupid to put him out there. Then the question comes in after that. Rookie Alex Wright has looked better over the last couple of weeks. Rookie Perrion Winfrey on the interior has started to look better over the last couple of weeks. These guys were kind of, things were coming out of 1,000,000 miles an hour early in the season. Seems like it's starting to slow down a little bit. But if you're going to see anybody besides Myles Garrett or Jadeveon Clowney make a play from the defensive line, odds are pretty good. It's going to be Alex Wright or it's going to be Perrion Winfrey.
Gotcha. And I guess the last question over here, looking at the injury report, Jack Conklin didn't practice, Klein didn't practice, Felton, Jedrick Willis. Are there anyone that you're concerned about that isn't going to play this week?
Only one that probably slightly concerns me is Jedrick Willis, because this is something new.
Okay.
Everything else, Jacqueline, and the Browns are just taking it easy. The last thing the Browns want to do is knowing with what Jack Conklin went through last year to get back here, and now that they have re-signed him, is to want to put Jack Conklin on a path where, there's going to be any possibility of him having to do any type of rehab off the offseason. But Jedrick Wills, this is new. This wasn't anything that's been, dealt with earlier in the year. And now that it's 2 practices, and we'll see, because most of the time, if you're a Cleveland Brown and you do not practice on Friday, you don't play. The Browns very rarely give that veteran luxury of you don't have to practice on Friday, but they will still pencil you in on Sunday, especially considering the fact that, the Browns essentially don't have much to play for.
Yeah, that's true. I guess let's touch on that, kind of bring it on home, right? So game prediction. So I guess 2 questions for you. The first question is, what needs to be like the ideal situation, like optimal game plan for Cleveland to win? And then do you think there's going to be any kind of like drop off because Cleveland has nothing to play for? Or do you think they're going to play hard going into this last game? What do you think?
The Cleveland Browns need to get ahead. It's just that simple. They're not a team that plays well from behind. What they are good at on the defensive side of the ball is coverage and pass rush. So that's all keys to getting ahead. And obviously, it even goes more to this factor, as we know Carson Wentz has always been maybe a hold on to the ball a second too long. Ends up taking sacks he shouldn't have taken. Just works and is part of it there. But also on the offensive side of the ball is I don't know if the Browns are going to play this to say, you know what I'm saying, or we'll slow the game down, we'll run the ball. I think they ideally probably get Deshaun Watson another 75 before this season is over. They want to get as much tape down as possible as Deshaun Watson so they can go into this offseason, dissect it, see what they like, take stuff out of the playbook, put stuff in the playbook, and start identifying will be matches with Deshaun Watson long term. So, for the Browns, the key to this is it's just the style that they play. It's paramount that they get the lead early, because then they can play the game the way they want to play it, as opposed to playing styles that they are not comfortable with.
Gotcha. And I guess they have that long-term perspective too, because I was going to ask about draft position, but they gave away the first-round pick for Deshaun Watson, right? So they don't really have any incentive to kind of slow down or anything there. So I got you.
Nope.
It makes sense. I think the whole throwing the ball around would probably make a lot of sense. Very good. I guess, do you have any questions for me before we bring it on home? Watch perspective?
I don't think. I mean, we got the biggest, the Carson Wentz one was the one that basically threw everybody for a loop here this week. I'm kind of this team, the Washington defense. I just love the fact that you can talk about your 2 interior defensive tackles have combined 15 with Montez Sweat. You're working Chase Young back in. I tried to tell everybody during the spring about 5th-round pick. Turned out to be an absolute darling of a selection for the Washington Commanders. I did think it was funny today. I don't believe it, that, they're hoping things work out here for Carson Wentz. And then, because they wouldn't be addressing quarterback in the offseason. Look, we can all say those things. We don't necessarily have to speak here. But it's certainly, make for, a pretty solid matchup here, I think, on Sunday.
No, I definitely agree with that. So yeah, Derek Forrest is definitely an Ohio native. Ohio people love him out there. So I love to see him shining. That came out of nowhere. Like definitely for Washington, I was definitely interested in a strong safety like Jacoby Brisker from Penn State. I wanted him in the 2nd round, and basically we got a defensive tackle. And I guess they saw Derek Forrest in training camp and kind of believed in him long term. So definitely a big one there for sure. Are you willing to do a prediction? What do you think's going to win on Sunday?
This is where it's tough, because, you don't know how to factor in if anything, because he goes wrong. Nick Chubb, his foot's not 100%, but he said he's going to play. I'm sure the Browns are going to limit his carries. They're not going to go out there. If you got more than 15 carries, I'd be stunned. But I think Deshaun Watson's got one in him this year. I think he's got one game in him this year. So is it this week? And could it be this week in the fact that they're going to go play a game that's going to be about a 75-degree temperature change? Difference 100%. Between the last time the Browns played Saturday at home, down that way on Sunday. I think this is going to be the week where maybe you get Deshaun's big one. And if you're telling me it's a Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz
shootout
battle, money on Deshaun on that one.
That's true. That's true. All right. I want to give a shout out to my cousin, Terry, in the chat. What's up, Terry? How you doing, bro? Good to see you. All right, Jeff, we're going to wrap it up. So I really appreciate you coming on and giving me your time. Before we log off, is there anything, well, first of all, can you kind of plug your socials, where they can find you on social media, what kind of products you're working on, and kind of bring it on home with that?
Obviously I'm part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We host the Locked On Browns podcast, myself and Garrett Bush. He's also part of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, which is done through Tegna, who also is part of a network. So it's been a big year for us. The key to that is, with Tegna is, do they have media buildings within the city you cover? For us, luckily, yes, they do. They have a television station in Cleveland. So it's helped us, obviously, with the growth of our show here tremendously. They've been nothing but, aces to us. We'll start to transition here, to more free agency. Obviously, we're going to have, a bunch of coaching Phil here for the Browns. So that's going to cover us here. In addition to the daily show, I'm going to start doing, I'm going to throw together some 2 to 3 minute shorts here covering, possible free agents, covering possible, draft picks, all that type of stuff. It just, fun gig here. Obviously, in January, I'd be loving to cover more football, but you basically play the at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. The show itself, whether it's YouTube, whether it is, of course, on your favorite podcast platform, and even for Locked On Cleveland Sports, you will find the Locked On Browns podcast, Locked On Guardians, Cavs, the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. So, been a hell of a season here. Always looking for the best, and just continue to just try to put our stamp on coverage weekend.
100%. And guys, I vouch for all the Locked On podcasts for sure. All season long, I've been reaching out to the Locked On Titans, Locked On Browns. So they're fantastic. Jeff's been really responsive and been on top of everything there. So I definitely appreciate that. All right, guys, have a great night. I'm George Carmi from Full Press Coverage. You guys can find me at GCarmi21. Have a great evening. Enjoy your night. Peace out.